All right, make sure you stick your marker there in Lamentations, although I don't think that we're going to go anywhere else in the Bible tonight. We'll be here. I said this morning, but our daily Bible reading had Lamentations on the schedule for last Monday, and I have been trying this year to do some kind of a lesson somewhere from that daily Bible reading, and so I've been off schedule for just a little bit, but we're back tonight. Also, I don't know if you'll recognize that slide, but there were a couple, I don't remember how long ago it was, maybe 2 years ago, on Sunday nights through the whole year, every Sunday night was a one-lesson overview of all the books of the Old Testament. And I skipped a couple of those because I was planning on, the Jeremiah and Lamentations, I was planning on doing them later. And I just never did Jeremiah. Rob taught Jeremiah this year, or I don't know, he taught Jeremiah eventually. So this is on my Old Testament overview slide. If you want to see any of those or have any of those notes, I've got them all. There's a playlist on YouTube for that if you want that. But that's what we're going to do. We're going to look at Lamentations. The first couple of things that I want to say about Lamentations are just introduction stuff. The first is the Hebrew Bible, the actual Hebrew Old Testament. A lot of the names are not the names that we have in our Bible. So Genesis is in the beginning. That's the title for Genesis. And it just goes like that. Oftentimes the title for the book is the first word. And that's the case with Lamentations. In verse 1, Lamentations 1 and verse 1, it says, "How lonely sits the city that was full of people." And so the Hebrew title of Lamentations is How. And that fits, I think that fits really good with what the book is, Lamentations, because it's how. Like that's a really good title for this book. You can see two other times in the book where this word how is used, and they're at the starts of sections. So chapter 2 and verse 1, "How the Lord in his anger has set the daughter of Zion under a cloud." And also in chapter 4 and verse 1, "How the gold has grown dim and how the pure gold has changed." I asked this morning if you have a chance this afternoon to read through Lamentations to come tonight, and I was talking to Josh out there in the front, and he said, "We read through Lamentations today," and he kind of went like, and it's like, yeah. I posted in that group chat that, I don't remember which group chat it was, after I read this last week, Lamentations, and I just wrote, yikes. This book I think this is a great title. How, God? This book is hard. This book is like, God has really let Jerusalem have it. They have sinned, and God punished them, but his punishment was hard. He really let them have it. And Lamentations is crying out about that. That's what a lament is. We'll talk about that in just a little bit. It is somebody's lament. I am lamenting the fall of Jerusalem. And probably also a big chunk of that is lamenting my own sin. If you pay attention to this sort of thing, I don't really want to talk a lot about this right now. But the date and the circumstances, so Jerusalem has been destroyed, which you can stick a date on that, 586 BC. The Lamentations is lamenting the fall of Jerusalem. Jerusalem has been destroyed, and you don't really see a whole lot. There's a lot of stuff in the book about, God, we want you to bring us out of this. So I kind of assume that the restoration has not happened yet in 539. So I would date Lamentations somewhere between 586 and 539. Now let me show you something cool about Lamentations. You're definitely going to want to write this in your Bible. If you don't have any sort, some Bibles have like at the start of the book of Lamentations, there's like a paragraph. That's basically what we're doing right now, that paragraph. My Bible doesn't have one of those. And so if you don't have any sort of intro information in that, you're going to need to write this, or remember it anyway, because you can't see it in your English Bible. But Lamentations it's 5 separate poems. And each of the 5 poems are acrostic. And what that means is, an acrostic poem is the first line starts with A, the second line starts with B, the next line starts with C, the next line starts with D. And so there's an acrostic section on that. So let me give you a couple of examples of this. Also, I'm saying A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Those are English letters. That's not the Hebrew. But, let's communicate, at least in a way that we can communicate. So in chapter 1 and verse 1, there's a big block. Verse 1 is a block. And what you should see in that block, even though in my Bible I've got 6 lines, that block in verse 1 is 3 lines. 3 lines. Each line is a parallel section, but it's 3 lines. And so in chapter 1 and verse 1, if this was the way that it was in English, how would start with A. And then in verse 2, she weeps bitterly in the night. There's 3 lines, the whole section. She would start with B. And then if you go all the way to the end of chapter 1, you'll notice that there's 22 verses in chapter 1. There's 22 letters in the Hebrew alphabet. So every one of those blocks or sections is A, B, C, D, E, F, G. The same thing is true of chapter 2. Just look at it. Same blocks, 3-line blocks or 6-line blocks, but they're 3 lines, three parallel lines. And you'll notice that there are 22 verses in chapter 2, 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet. Let's do chapter 4 next. Chapter 4 is the same thing, only you don't have 3 lines this time, you only have 2 lines. But on those blocks, verse 1, A, verse 2, B. Look, I can show you this. I know this is not going to mean anything to you all, but there's chapter 1. Hebrew, you read right to left, so this is the start of our line over here. So this is not broken into your 3-line sections, but verse 1, A. Verse 2, B, Bet. Verse 3, Gimel. Daleth. I don't even know my alphabet anymore. And, oh no, that's Daleth. Gimel. G, D. That's the way that it works. So there's chapter 1, chapter 2, A, B, G, D. Chapter 4, A, B, G, D. That's your line. Now look at chapter 3. And this is what I want you to start thinking about on this one. Chapter 3, look at the way that the blocks are lined up in chapter 3. There's a block, but in that block, verses 1, 2, 3. And then there's another block, 4, 5, 6. And so what's happening in chapter 3, if you want to see it visually, you can see it right here. Chapter 3, the first line, A, B, B, B. It's not just the first letter of the block, it's A, B, 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 C, 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 D, D, D. That's the way it goes. And this is something, besides it just being neat, I love this stuff. It's just neat by itself to know that. But besides all of that, doesn't it kind of do this to you though? Whenever you see a block A, a block B, and then you come to chapter 3 and it's A, B, B, B. Doesn't that kind of scream at you? Pay attention to me. And so you could kind of think, chapter 3, because of the way it's laid out, chapter 3 is almost screaming at us, pay attention to me. I'm the point. I want you to see me in chapter 3. And so you see something like that. Okay, last thing, look over at chapter 5. Also 22 verses, but there's nothing special about it. So I was telling Kevin about that, and Kevin went, psych! That's what chapter 5 is. It's like 1, ABC, 2, ABC, 3, A, B, 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 C, C, 4, ABC, 22 lines, nothing. So there you go. I sometimes wonder, I'm sure that God is not like, watch this, I'm going to play a trick on him. But it kind of makes you wonder, like, I don't know why I would get 22 lines and nothing compared to the others. But anyway, that's the structure of Lamentations. You're going to want to write that down so you can see it. I don't think that I would do this if I were you. If you shouldn't do something that doesn't mean something to you. Oh, you know what? You don't have to ask me this. I tried this last week to tell you. If you just get on ChatGPT and say, tell me the Hebrew alphabet, it'll give you the English letters. It'll say Aleph, and it'll show you a picture of the Aleph. And then it'll say Bet, and it'll show you a picture of the Bet. And Gimel will show you a picture of the Gimel. And so you can see it. And if you were interested in this sort of a thing, you could take each one of those Hebrew letters or the English corresponding letter and write it next to each block or section, if that's something that appealed to you. Okay, that's just structure stuff. Let's get into the message. I've got 3 messages for you. There's 3 things. When I read through Lamentations, there are 3 things that jumped out at me. And not because I'm a preacher and this is a sermon and there's 3 points. There really were, like, I read through and I kept my notes and I thought, these are the 3 things that really jump out at me. I told you we weren't going to go anywhere else. That's not true. I'm going to go over to Leviticus 26 right now. Because Lamentations is the fulfillment of something that God said he was going to do a long time ago. In Leviticus 26, you can also see this exact same thing in Deuteronomy 28. Leviticus 26, starting in verse 3, is the blessings. And the blessings are, if you walk in my statutes and observe my commandments and do them, then, and he's going to say, I'll bless you this way, I'll bless you this way, I'll bless you this way, I'll bless you this way. There's lots of blessings. If you obey me and do what I told you to do, I'm going to bless you. And then you come down to verse 14, and it says, but if you will not listen to me and will not do all of these commandments, and then let's actually read some of these. Verse 15, if you spurn my statutes, and if your soul abhors my rules, so that you will not do all my commandments but break my covenant, then I will do this to you. I will visit you with panic, with wasting disease, and fever that consume the eye and make the heart ache. And you shall sow your seed in vain, for your enemies shall eat it. I will set my face against you. You shall be struck down before your enemies. Those who hate you shall rule over you. And so I would do this. I would read through those curses in Leviticus 26 and also Deuteronomy 28. I would read through those because Lamentations is basically God saying, I told you, if you did not obey me, this is what's going to happen. And Lamentations is an author crying out saying, oh man, all of this stuff happened. And it's worse than you can even imagine. Like, it's bad to read it on paper, but this guy lived it. And so it's bad. Lamentations is bad. And so the thing, I said this, on my heading up here, point number 1, God does what he says. That's what I wrote on the slide because I feel like it's more proper. In my notes, it said, God doesn't mess around. And that's really what we're seeing. Let's see some examples of this. Chapter 1, Lamentations chapter 1. And you can see verses 1 through 4. We're not going to read all of this, but I want to show you what happens here. 1 through 4. How lonely sits the city that was full of people. How like a widow has she become. She who was great among the nations. She who was a princess among the provinces has become a slave. She weeps. It might be fun to read through Lamentations and pay attention to how many times you see weeping and crying and lamenting. That's why it's called lamentation. She weeps bitterly in the night with tears on her cheeks. Among all her lovers, she has none to comfort her. All her friends have dealt treacherously with her. They have become her enemies. Judah has gone into exile because of affliction and hard servitude. She dwells now among the nations, but finds no resting place. Her pursuers have all overtaken her in the midst of her distress. The roads to Zion mourn, for none come to the festival. All her gates are desolate. Her priests groan. Her virgins have been afflicted, and she herself suffers bitterly. Now, this is why I wanted to read all of that, because up until this section, you get, oh man, there's a lot of bad stuff that happened to Judah and Jerusalem here. And we're going to list all of that bad stuff. But I think if you're going to say, what's the message? I should have highlighted God. The message is not, this is not just some accident of history. Oops, one nation rose to power and wanted a land bridge to Egypt. And so I got a bigger stick than you, and so I defeated Judah and Jerusalem. What Lamentations is doing to us is saying, no, this is no accident. God is doing this. God is the one who's doing this thing. Look at verse 5. This is where it really changes directions. Her foes have become the head, her enemies prosper. First, this is the first one. Because the Lord has afflicted her for the multitude of her transgressions. This is God who has done this thing to this group of people. Look at verses 12 and 13. Is it nothing to you, all you who pass by? Look and see if there is any sorrow like my sorrow, which was brought upon me, here you go, which the Lord inflicted on the day of his fierce anger. From on high, he sent fire into my bones. He made it descend. In my ESV, it doesn't do this. But if you have a New American Standard, Becky, does your New King James capitalize he? In verse 14? I guess it'd be verse 13 at the end. Yeah. So the New American Standard, the New King James Version, capitalize the he, so that as you're reading through, you're like, God did this, God did this, God did this, God, there, you can't miss it. There's a lot of those. So what verse was I at? Let's look at verse 15. The Lord rejected all my mighty men in my midst. He summoned an assembly against me to crush my young men. The Lord has trodden, as in a winepress, the virgin daughter of Judah. I'm not going to read chapter 2, but chapter 2 is everything that God did. Look at it, verse 1. How the Lord in his anger has set the daughter of Zion under a cloud. He has cast down from heaven to earth the splendor of Israel. It would be fun. It would be fun to go through chapter 2 and just highlight every time you see the Lord. He. Because I bet you would see all through this chapter, this is God's doing. That's the point, is that this thing has happened because God made it happen. A big verse, something to pay attention to, verse 5, chapter 2 and verse 5. The Lord has become like an enemy. He has swallowed up Israel. He has swallowed up all its palaces. He has laid in ruins its strongholds. And he has multiplied in the daughter of Judah mourning and lamentation. I took chapter 2 and verse 17 and started in my notes. Chapter 2 and verse 17 is going to be like, okay, if you want to see one verse that illustrates this point in this entire book, it's probably going to be chapter 2 and verse 17 for me. The Lord has done what he purposed. He has carried out his word, which he commanded long ago. He has thrown down without pity. He has made the enemy rejoice over you and exalted the might of your foe. There's another one in chapter 4 and verse 11. I'm not going to read that, but that's going to be point number 1. Big point number 1. And this is the thing that I think is important for us. Think about this. a lot of the other prophets are written before the destruction happens, right? That's the reason for the prophet. It's to say, hey guys, God said, obey him or he's going to curse you in these ways, and you're not obeying him, and if we don't get this sorted out, destruction is coming. And that's what the prophets are doing. They're saying, come on everybody, wake up. But think about Lamentations though. Lamentations is not that. Lamentations is to say, he said so, and sure enough, he did it. And so that's where I want us to stop for 1 second, because I have to consciously do this. This is not a natural thing for me. But it is to say something like, what is the point of this book? Like, why? Why do I have that? And you would say, well, it's a reflection of this person's heart and how he's lamenting. Okay, but that's his heart and why he's lamenting. But the question is, why did God preserve this book in the Bible and bring it down? Why do I need to be reading this book? What am I going to get out of this book? What's the point? And the point is to remember, God doesn't mess around. He does what he says he's going to do. And sometimes he holds off for a long time. But the point is, and something to remember, the point is, if God said he's going to do something, if he said he's going to reward righteousness and punish sinfulness, and all of us have sinfulness, we should really pay attention to this book, because the message of this book is God doesn't mess around. It's best to believe him when he says that he's going to do something. That's what this book points me to. Okay, that's one of three. Number two. Number two is going to be what I think is, I think this is a powerful message in the book. And that is, this author, as much as he's suffering, and as much as he's lamenting and crying about this thing that God has brought upon Judah and Jerusalem, he outright says multiple times in this book, I deserve it. This is what happened to me because of my sin, and I deserved every bit. Which is like, so think about this. If you read Lamentations and your response is, yikes, like big eyes, whoa, God doesn't mess around. But then think about the heart that must be required of a person to look at something so awful and then bow your head and say, and I brought it upon myself. Or, and we brought it upon ourselves. So you're going to see throughout Lamentation lots of acknowledgement. I did this. I am a sinner. There's going to be a lot of confession. We brought this upon ourselves. Let's look at some of these examples. Chapter 1 and verse 8. Jerusalem sinned grievously. Therefore, she became filthy. That's it. You got what you deserved. You paid for this thing. Now you're getting it. Verse 14. My transgressions were bound into a yoke. By my hand they were fastened together. They were set upon my neck. He caused my strength to fail. The Lord gave me into the hands of those whom I cannot withstand. But it starts in the very first part of verse 14. My transgressions. So you know what a yoke is? A yoke is that wooden bar, a metal bar that runs across two cows' necks, and it holds them together, and it's like a heavy burden to bear. And what the author of Lamentation is saying is, that yoke on my neck that I'm carrying around, it's my sin. That's what he says. My transgression were bound into a yoke. Verse 18, the first part of verse 18. The Lord is in the right, for I have rebelled against his word. Can you do that? Seriously, when you're in the midst of suffering or hurt or hardship, are you able to look at your life and say, God is right to do this? That's hard. That's hard. That's going to take, that's hard. I don't know how else to say it. That one's tough. That's a big one for me. Verse 18. That's one that's probably getting highlighted in my Bible. The Lord is in the right, for I have rebelled against his word. Let's look at some others. Chapter 3 and verse 42. 3:42. We have transgressed and rebelled, and you have not forgiven. Chapter 4 and verse 13. This was for the sins of her prophets and the iniquities of her priests, who shed in the midst of her the blood of the righteous. And then chapter 5 and verse 16. This is the last one we'll look at on this. The crown has fallen from our head. Woe to us. It's not over, for we have sinned. And so this book is full of acknowledgement and confession, and that would be another one of those. What am I supposed to take away from this book? What am I supposed to learn from this book? And everybody, it's like this is the American way. It's not the American way because it started in Genesis chapter 3. What have you done? The woman who you gave me the fruit. And so we asked the woman, what have you done? There's a snake. It's a snake's fault. The snake did it. And it's like inside of most of us. But to stop and to bow our heads and to say, I rebelled and I sinned and I brought this on myself. That would be a real good place to be able to get your heart, to be able to take responsibility for that and acknowledge that. I want to just say one other thing about this. I think that that's the last point on this one. So in all of these verses that I'm not going to read right now, 1:16, 20, 11, those verses that are listed right there, one question that I have, and I don't think that you can answer this question one way or the other, but this is a question that I had reading through a couple different times. Is it lamentation? Am I crying because of the horrible things that have happened, that Judah and Jerusalem are destroyed? Or am I crying because of my sin, and I'm so sorry and sick for what I've done that brought these consequences on us all? And it does seem like, especially in chapter 1 and verse 11, let's read that one. It does seem like the crying there, the lament is not, oh no, that really hurt. It's, oh no, I am so sick to my stomach for what I have done. Chapter 1 and verse 11, all her people groan as they search for bread. They trade their treasures for food to revive their strength. Look, O Lord, and see, for I am despised. I don't think that's the verse that I wanted, but it might be chapter 2 and verse 11. Doesn't matter. Which one are you crying out about? Chapter 1 and verse 11 was also a good verse, so we didn't lose anything. Okay, number 3. This is last. And this is what I was kind of pointing you towards at the very start of this lesson. I think this is incredible. This is, to me, this thing that we're talking about right now is the highlight of this book, which is really kind of funny because it's called Lamentations. I'm lamenting and I'm crying and, it's all so bad, and I'm not making fun. It really is bad. This really stinks hard. But what's crazy to me about this is that these people, this author, and the people that he's writing about, they are at the very, very bottom. There is nowhere else further down for these people to go. They are at the very bottom. And this is a place that will either completely destroy you, or you will look to God for help, because he is the only source of hope and help. And that's what happens in Lamentations. Isn't that funny to think that a book about lamenting God's judgment is a book where you're going to find some of the highest messages of God's hope and forgiveness and redemption in all of the Bible. It's not the place that I would have looked. But sure enough. So let's read some of these. Chapter 1 and verse 22 is the first one that I found. Let all their evil doing come before you, and deal with them as you have dealt with me because of all my transgressions. And so that one's not really hope. That one's saying, okay, God, you've done all of this to us, And now I'm saying, repay those who brought this affliction on us. But here's the thing. He knows where to go and who to ask. God, help us and do this thing. So let's go to chapter 3. Remember what I said about chapter 3 sounding like maybe because of the poetic features, A, B, 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 C, C, C. It's almost like God is saying, pay attention to this chapter. This is where the main message is. And so we're going to read an extended section of this because this is it. This is the section. Chapter 3, starting in verse 19. And I'm planning on reading down to verse 41. Remember my affliction and my wanderings, the wormwood and the gall. My soul continually remembers it and is bowed down within me. But this I call to mind, and therefore I have hope. Now, isn't that something? In this book, to say in this spot, I have hope. Verse 22. Some of these should sound really familiar to you. The steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. His mercies never come to an end. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. The Lord is my portion, says my soul. Therefore, I will hope in him. The Lord is good to those who wait for him, to the soul who seeks him. It is good that one should wait quietly for the salvation of the Lord. It is good for a man that he bear the yoke in his youth. So this next couple of verses that we're going to read, he says, it is good for a man that he bear the yoke in his youth. And what he's saying here is, it's not all bad that we suffer. Especially, he's calling especially here a young man. It's not all bad. Listen in verse 28. This is what you get when you suffer. Let him sit alone in silence when it is laid on him. Let him put his mouth in the dust. There may yet be hope. Let him give his cheek to the one who strikes, and let him be filled with insults. For the Lord will not cast off forever. But though he cause grief, he will have compassion, according to the abundance of his steadfast love. For he does not afflict from his heart or grieve the children of men. To crush underfoot all the prisoners of the earth, to deny a man justice in the presence of the Most High, to subvert a man in his lawsuit. The Lord does not approve. You can't do these things. It's not okay to live like this. Verse 37. Who has spoken and it came to pass, unless the Lord has commanded it? Is it not from the mouth of the Most High that good and bad come? Why should a living man complain, a man, about the punishment of his sins? Let us test and examine our ways and return to the Lord. Let us lift up our hearts and our hands to God in heaven. We have transgressed and rebelled, and you have not forgiven. And so those sections, especially the song, it's hard to read those verses without singing them. Steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. I can't even say the words, but here in the midst of all this suffering, you see this message. But there is hope in God. Look at verse 55. Chapter 3 and verse 55. And I'm going to read down to the end of the chapter. I called on your name, O Lord, from the depths of the pit. You heard my plea. Do not close your ear to my cry for help. You came near when I called on you. You said, do not fear. You have taken up my cause, O Lord. You have redeemed my life. You have seen the wrong done to me, O Lord. Judge my cause. You have seen all their vengeance, all their plots against me. You have heard their taunts, O Lord, all their plots against me. The lips and the thoughts of my assailants are against me all the day long. Behold, their sitting and their rising. I am the object of their taunts. You will repay them, O Lord, according to the work of their hands. You will give them dullness of heart. Your curse will be on them. You will pursue them in anger and destroy them from under your heavens, O Lord. And so here is this, ultimately, a message of hope that when the very worst happens, and you can't possibly go any farther and deeper into the pit, there's only one place left to hope, and that's in God. And so we learn from this book to cry out to Him, and we say, He will hear, He will forgive, and He will avenge and do the right thing in the end. Chapter 4 and verses 21 and 22. Let's just look at a couple more. 4:21. Rejoice and be glad, O daughter of Edom, you who dwell in the land of Uz. So it's this. The Edomites. You hurt me. You hurt Judah and Jerusalem. And so he says, rejoice and be glad. Have your fun while you can. In verse 21, but you also, to you also the cup shall pass. You shall become drunk and strip yourself bare. The punishment of your iniquities, O daughter of Zion, is accomplished. He will keep you in exile no longer, but your iniquities, O daughter of Edom, He will punish. He will uncover your sins. And then lastly, chapter 5 and verse 19 through 22. This is how the book ends. Chapter 5 and verse 19. But you, O Lord, reign forever. Your throne endures to all generations. Why do you forget us forever? Why do you forsake us for so many days? This is our prayer. Restore us to yourself, O Lord, that we may be restored. Renew our days as of old, unless you have utterly rejected us and you remain exceedingly angry with us. I've got a one-sentence summary for you. Lamentations is a reminder that God does what He says, that the way forward for me is to acknowledge and to confess my sin and to fall hopefully at His feet for forgiveness and salvation. But aside from that one-sentence summary, I would stop here for just a second and say, let's remember this. Maybe it seems like you get a pass on your sin. God does what He says. There are no passes on sin. And let's say you come to acknowledge that and confess your sin and you say, I deserve all of this and it is upon me and I'm at the very bottom of the pit right now. First, in Lamentations, you look down because of my sin. But then once you see your sin and you're in the bottom, you look up for the one and only place of hope and forgiveness and restoration. That's my takeaway from this book. I hope we can learn something from that. I think Dave's going to sing a couple more songs that are going to point us to that theme. If you're here tonight and you're not a Christian, at the end of every service, you have an opportunity to become one, to put your faith in Jesus, to repent of your sins, to die to yourself and be buried in the waters of baptism. But more likely tonight, if you need to confess your sin, or if you're in the pit because of your sin, or maybe because of some other kind of suffering, and you need our support or our prayers or our help, we'll hold up your hands and pray with you and walk that road with you. Come forward and let us know what we can do as we stand and sing the invitation song.